United States is absolutely superior in any sort of military force, but Iran can continue to keep on fighting with very low-cost items.
You've had these two very public statements by the Oman foreign minister, which says that Israel is looking at rebalancing the region to its own interests, and we should beware. And you have a very long statement, a social media post from the former Emir of Qatar, which urges the Gulf countries to get their act together.
Every nation will understand that I don't want my people to be completely dependent on the Strait of Hormuz. I don't want my people to be dependent on the volatile oil market.
Hello and welcome to this episode of India and the World on DeKoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. We are now entering the third week of the US-Israeli strike on Iran, and it looks like this war is only escalating and perhaps spiraling. President Trump, it is reported, has not ruled out the possibility of sending boots on the ground. And at the moment, this war is sending unprecedented economic shockwaves around the world as well, largely because oil prices have been hit. Many countries who are very far away, even geographically, from the war zone are being impacted by these rising oil prices, including India. And we've now seen President Trump in fact, threaten NATO allies into suggesting that they should send warships to the Strait of Hormuz, which is that waterway through which these ships carrying oil pass through, which Iran basically controls. And we have heard in the last few minutes that many of these countries have already rejected this request, as it were, from the US president, including Germany, Japan, Australia. He had also made this appeal to China. But none of these countries were consulted before this war was launched, and none of them feel obligated to send their warships and get into it at this point. Although Trump has made threats that if they don't agree to what he's demanding, then they'll have, as he put it, a very bad future. Now, what does all of this mean for the region? Is this actually going to get worse before it gets better? And what is the possible off ramp here? We have two extremely distinguished diplomats joining us on the program today who have a tremendous experience in the region and indeed in peacekeeping itself. Let me first introduce Ambassador Navdeep Suri. He has been India's envoy to Egypt, to the UAE, and High Commissioner to Australia. He joins us from Amritsar today. And Ambassador Eric Solheim joins us, a former diplomat, a former politician, and he's joining us from Oslo, someone who has played a very key role in peacekeeping missions in the past. Thank you very much to both of you for joining us. Ambassador Navdeep Suri, I just wanted your take on the big picture at the moment. Are you getting a sense that we are nowhere near this ending soon?
Yes, Nidhi, it certainly seems to be that way, with one crucial caveat, which is that given President Trump's unpredictability, should he wake up from the right side of the bed tomorrow and decide that he has won the war, there's nothing to stop him from making that declaration, except perhaps the Iranians. But on a more serious note, I think there was this lovely study by J.P. Morgan, which said that the three material factors which could bring this war to a halt are munitions, markets, and midterms. So I think those are the three things to watch, at least from one perspective, that are the Americans or the Israelis going to be running short of air defense munitions? How do the markets react? And how are they going to impact the midterms? I think those are the factors that are going to be at play in Washington.
I want to discuss all those factors in a little more detail in just a moment. But Ambassador Solheim, what is your take on this? Do you believe that the Americans perhaps underestimated or miscalculated which way this war was going to go? That perhaps they thought it would end in 48 hours and boom, there would be regime change and, they could claim victory and move on. And given that that has not happened, in a sense, do you see a further escalation at a time when there doesn't really appear to be, at least on the surface, uh, any kind of dialogue in place to find a way out?
Look, I think there is hardly any doubt that he thought this would be a very short and very sweet adventure for the United States, like in Venezuela, where they took out Mr. Maduro, or the 12 Days War, which was very successful from an American-Israeli point of view. And on that, he is in line with so many other leaders in history. You think George W. Bush would have started the Iraq War if he had known that it would last for 15 years. Hitler didn't even send winter clothes with his forces when they attacked the Soviet Union because they will be back before Christmas. There are so many wars which has been started by people who thought they would be very short, very victorious, and play out well for themselves, but it was much longer and much more protracted. And the key factor in this war is, of course, that it's in a completely asymmetric war. United States is absolutely superior in any sort of military force. They can bomb Iran back to the Stone Age. They can destroy any target in Iran. But Iran can continue to keep on fighting with very low-cost items, drones. Drones will stop traffic of ships through the Hormuz. Drones will make it very hard to build tourism or economic development in the Middle East. And this is a very low-cost war. And I think Iran will have the capacity to do that for very long. So we are now in a very paradoxical situation that maybe Iran wants to make this war protracted, while Trump wants to declare victory, but he can't declare victory because there is no victory.
But Ambassador Solheim, let me ask you your view on his, I'm being polite, his request to NATO countries to come forward and put their warships in the Hormuz Strait, which has effectively been rejected by them, saying that they would face a very bad future if they didn't do it. Which sounded like a threat, of course, and it does often when it comes from him. But it's interesting, isn't it, that for a president who so unilaterally went into this war, was kind of disparaging about Prime Minister Keir Starmer only a week ago, is today turning to NATO allies, and of course he's been disparaging about NATO itself, and is now turning to that same alliance and saying you need to step in. Does that indicate, in a sense, a weakness of the American position in this war right now?
Very clearly. So, look, this is very different from any other war in the history of the United States. Every other war was very popular in the beginning. The Vietnam War, we don't remember it now. It was quite popular in the United States when it started. Nearly everyone supported the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. I think Bernie Sanders was probably the one and only member of the Senate who voted against the war in Iraq. Everyone else supported it. It was 95% support. This war is not even popular when it starts. And every other war has become less and less popular over time. And look, while this war is very unpopular in the United States, it's even more unpopular in Europe and in other parts of the world. So the chance that any European or Japanese or Korean or Chinese or whatever leader will want to put their people in the harm's way in this war, with the chance that they will be shot and perish, that's very low. I mean, why would a European leader take that chance when the war is so unpopular in its own nation?
Ambassador Suri, you know the West Asian region so well, having served there for so long. Today itself, Dubai airport was shut down for several hours. Many Emirates flights that were in the air had to turn back, even to destinations in America and Europe, because there was a drone that landed somewhere nearby. There was a big fire, etc. Now, this has been a recurring pattern over the last several days. In terms of the damage that this is doing to the UAE, which considered itself a safe haven, tell us about how that might play a role, not just in the damage to the UAE, but other countries in the region that have been hit by Iranian drones. Could that be the pressure point on the US that could lead to some kind of a deal or a ceasefire?
Nidhi, I hear two different voices from my friends in the Gulf. You've had these two very public statements, one by the Oman foreign minister, which says that Israel is looking at rebalancing the region to its own interests, and we should beware. And you have a very long statement, a social media post from the former Emir of Qatar, which urges the Gulf countries to get their act together. work together and realize that they can't depend on the U.S. Security umbrella. So you've got that whole thing brewing. In your initial comments, you spoke about a New York Times statement and something about the Saudis urging the Americans to continue. I would just take that with a pinch of salt, because we're also familiar with a number of disinformation campaigns from the Israeli side in particular, which are aimed at drawing the Gulf countries into the war. And so far, the Gulf countries have taken the position that we are appalled by the aggression against us by Iran. The Iranian aggression against us is illegal, and we reserve the right to respond. But at the same time, the sober voices amongst them are saying, this is not our war. We don't want to get into this war, because who knows, tomorrow the Americans will pack up and go away, and we will still be next door to an angry and wounded neighbor who's much bigger than us. You can't change geography. So you've got all of those dilemmas really playing out, where the damage being done to the economies of the Gulf countries is real. The damage or the erosion of the brand that had been so assiduously built over the decades, really, as Dubai, for example, being a safe haven in the middle of all the turmoil in the region. So you have a war in Ukraine, the Ukrainian billionaires are rushing into Dubai. You have a conflict in Russia, they are coming to Dubai. You have a conflict in Iran, they are coming to Dubai. I think there's a pause button on that. But finally, I would just make one point that, again, based on my conversations with friends in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi in particular, I keep hearing it's remarkable the extent to which life is still normal. The malls are open, the restaurants are open, people are going to work. Schools were closed early with the Eid break coming up. And the fact that the Emirati air defense system has been able to at least hold back 92-94% of the incoming drones and missiles and other projectiles that have been thrown at them, has created a sense of comfort amongst the people that Iran has done its best, and we've been able to cope with that. While the Iranians are showing resilience against the Americans, the Emiratis and others are showing their resilience against the Iranian attacks and saying, this is the worst that you could do, and we have shown that we could stand up to it
I
and stay
think
firm. So there's all of
I
that
think
element at
yeah.
work.
I think it's important that you said that, and the reference you made was to a New York Times report today, which said that the Saudi crown prince was, in a sense, egging Donald Trump on to continue to hit Iran harder. And as you said, a lot of these things have to be taken with a pinch of salt, given the complexities of politics also in the region. But Ambassador Solheim, in all of this, while so many countries are struggling to get their oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, India has been able to do so with two oil tankers at least. On, I think it was Saturday, Foreign Minister Jaishankar has said that there is no blanket deal with Iran on this, that it's literally a case by case basis situation. But I think his point was that India is talking to Iran, and it has, as he put it, yielded some results at least. Is that the way to go, is my point. I mean, Trump seems to think that continuing to threaten Iran, bombard it, send warships there, boots on the ground, that may be the way to let these oil tankers pass through. But is there a lesson in this that, pick up the phone, find a way to talk? Talking may be the only way. Cessation of hostilities may be the only way for this to actually happen.
Absolutely. I think the way Jaishankar is pointing to is also the way that many other countries want to act. Look, this war is absolutely unwelcome for nearly all other players. It's making it more more costly with fertilizer and gas in India. It's very unwelcome to India, but it's also unwelcome to Europe. to Africa, to China, to everyone. The most negative impact may be on the poorest nations in Africa, which are completely dependent on oil, even for the electricity, and which won't get it and won't have tourists, won't have investment. Will be very, very negative if it goes on. So I think every nation will tend to act to protect its own interest in this regard. And there is also, if I may mention that, there is also a long-term effect here, which also is positive, and that is, of course, every nation will understand that I don't want my people to be completely dependent on the Strait of Hormuz. I don't want my people to be dependent on the volatile oil market. What do? Well, expand solar, wind, hydro. The sun is Indian, the wind is Indian, the great rivers of India are Indian. If you move into renewables, you depend on your national resources and not on volatile international affairs. And that tendency will be there everywhere.
You've had such a big role in peacekeeping efforts and other volatile conflicts in the past, Ambassador Solheim. If you were asked today to try and mediate peace in the Gulf, any tips?
Well, it's well above my pay grade, that's for sure. But yes, you need to reach out to the key players. I mean, that's Mr. Trump, to the Americans, to the Iranians, to some extent to the Israelis. But I think still the scope of independent Israeli action, if the United States doesn't agree, is very limited. So at the end of the day, is to bring the top leaders of Iran and the top leaders of the United States to some agreement where both sides can declare victory. Trump can say, I achieved my aims and I want to stop now. And where Iran can say, we were able to fight back against the most powerful nation in the world, and now we have got some assurance that America will not attack us again in the near future.
Ambassador Suri, how concerned are you that this could further escalate if there are boots on the ground? Again, reports suggesting today that Trump is considering maybe a capture of Iran's strategically important Kharg island, which in any case was bombed by the Americans a few days ago and has, I think, 90% of Iran's own oil reserves there. And therefore, if that happens, what are we looking at?
I think there's a department of bad ideas in the Pentagon that has been in a hyperactive mode and keeps coming up with these things, which you can talk about today, but you will probably repent at leisure. Nidhi, just to add on a point that Ambassador Solheim made, I think the Iranians are quite clear this time that, if you are putting yourself in their position, the Israelis came and hit them in 2024. They hit them in 2025, and now they've hit them in 2026. You want to break that habit. You want to break that pattern. And the only way, from an Iranian perspective, that you do that is by raising the costs for everybody concerned, and giving everybody room to think that, is this really something I want to do? Is it a cost worth paying? So I think the Iranians are seeking to reset the equation that has up till now existed. And they want to get not just short-term assurances, but perhaps a more durable understanding. Whether they are able to get it with the Israeli government, which for the last 40 years has been wanting the demise of the government in Iran, whether you can get it out of a US administration which seems to have serious attention deficit disorder, I don't know. But the mood certainly this time seems to be that we can't repeat the mistakes of 2025 and 2024, and we need to play the game differently. And this is why I think, your initial question, that can it end soon? Maybe not, because I think the Iranians are trying to extract something out of it, and they might demonstrate that their threshold to absorb pain, even in a very physical form of the bombings, is greater than the American threshold of gas prices crossing $4 at the pump. So,
One last That's an important point. I just have one last question for you, Ambassador Suri, which is that on the Indian position on this, there's been a lot of criticism from the diplomatic community, ex envoys, others, commentators, etc., that India made a mistake by seemingly openly siding with Israel when this all started. And there seems to have been a course correction over the last week or so. Prime Minister Modi reaching out to the Iranian president, Foreign Minister Jaishankar having multiple conversations with the Iranian foreign minister. Now we've had two Indian flagged oil tankers also pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Do you see a belated, shall we say, shifting of the Indian position that is working hopefully to our advantage now?
Yeah, I mean, Nidhi, I think there's no doubt in my mind that over the last few years, we've seen a steady tilt towards Israel. We saw it on the various resolutions on Gaza, and we've seen it play out now over the last 2 weeks. You could attribute it to reasons of national interest, to the fact that Israel is a crucial defense and security partner, that Israel is doing some amazing work in India through its agricultural centers of excellence, etc. But it's come at a cost to us in terms of some of our other important relationships. And I'm happy that the course correction is happening, because again, going back to geography, Iran will remain always an important neighbor, and so you can't jettison relations with Iran for the short-term convenience of A or B or C. And I think the art of our diplomacy has been to be in a position to engage with all the different partners, no matter what their
Absolutely.
inter-se relationships are, right? To say that we could have an independent Palestine policy and an independent Israel policy and an independent Iran policy was the hallmark of our diplomacy. And I think we need to go back to that.
Well, Ambassador Navdeep Suri, Ambassador Eric Solheim, thank you very much for joining us on India and the World today with your perspective on this important story. Lots to track as this war seems to be escalating day by day. Thank you very much. And that's it on the show this week. We'll be back with much more on India and the world as we track the war and its impact.